Hello, to be magnetic, Jessica, Lacey, everyone on the team. I'm going to submit a video testimonial because I think I just can't put into words everything I want to say. I think my story is very unique, how I found TBM, what led me to you guys, and everything that has happened since I have done the work through the pathway of being a member. A little context up until how I got to your guys' website. I got to you guys' website last year in 2020, kind of like right at the start of COVID. Leading up to that, so I was 30 at the time. When I was about 24, my world just kind of came crashing down. I was newly engaged and planning a wedding when all of a sudden my dad came down with severe mental illness, which was totally out of the realm of anything my family had ever experienced. We grew up very middle class. I have 3 siblings. My parents were just always like the fun, happy parents, always welcoming at our house. Christian upbringing, and grew up in Oklahoma, so we were in the Bible Belt, so very middle class, just a all-American family. And at the time, life was very seemingly perfect. My dad came down with mental illness, just randomly. He was in and out of mental hospitals for a year. In the midst of that, my mother seeing and witnessing all of this and kind of being an empty nester, not really having her identity or knowing her identity. After the kids moved out, she succumbed to mental illness as well, became very depressed, anxious. She herself went to a mental hospital. So for about a year and a half, we were just dealing with this family crisis of mental illness. We didn't even really know what it meant at the time. I've done a lot of research since, but in 2015, in June, my mother ended up committing suicide because of her depression and her anxiety. She just did not see any light at the end of the tunnel. Through that, obviously very hard. But my parents, growing up, they did not teach us how to express our feelings, our emotions, even know how to be aware of them. We had just skirted by through life, just doing sports, just doing school, you know, everything was, there was never any in-depth conversation. And so at the time of my mother's death, I was very, very disassociated with my feelings and my emotions. Like, I tried to not even cry at the funeral. I was like, I'm not gonna cry. Like, that's not what, you know, strong girls do. And so I was just so out of my body. So, you know, my go-to response with anything in life is just, oh, that's just life, and let's just scoot it under the rug and not deal with it. So 2 years went by. Before my mother committed suicide, I did get married, but we were on the rocks the entire time. We ended up getting a divorce. I got laid off from my career job. And then I started a business and a brand, all in the span of 2 years between 2015 and 2017. So obviously just not dealing with life itself and what had happened to me. And so I ended up moving to California from Oklahoma. Again, trying to escape. I was like, I just need to get away from here, this place, and start a whole new life. I can be a whole new person where no one knows me. Moved to California, had a couple months there where I was single, ended up meeting this guy. He was older, I got very trauma bonded with him. I was in total trauma, not in love. He pretty much withered me away emotionally. Very controlling, manipulative, a narcissist, sociopath. And at the time, I really didn't see it for a really long time, but it was a double-edged sword, because he did like open up my eyes to needing to work on myself, like, because he had gone to therapy and he had worked on himself emotionally. So he was like encouraging my emotional, you know, intelligence and maturity and wanting me to work on that. But he was also like this crazy sociopath. He was also stressing me out and kind of ruining my life. So I started working on myself then. I went to therapy with a lady in Beverly Hills. We did interactive psycho-body therapy. So it is exactly like Lacey's work, a lot of inner child work, a lot of sessions where I would just go back and talk to my inner child and releasing a lot of stuff. I definitely became aware that shame was my number one underlying negative emotion. So I had a lot of shame growing up in childhood. And then I was also in a very shameful relationship at the time. So I was trying to work through both of those things. And so just guilt, shame, and anxiety is what was coming up the most. And so yeah, I was going to therapy. I went for a whole year, almost every single week. I was really doing the work on myself. And the first time I came across TBM was my best friend sent me the clarity workshop. She sent it to me, and I didn't do it for a while, but later on I came back to it and I eventually did the workshop, and I loved it. I immediately joined the pathway, and I did the pathway for a whole year. I really dove into it. My therapy was actually I wasn't going as much, and TBM happened to come into my life right when I was kind of ending that, and it was perfect. Like, I honestly am like, I think therapy was obviously very good for me to have that initial help at the beginning, but TBM is like, I always tell people it's such cheap therapy if you actually go in and do the work. So that was right in the middle of 2020. I was still in this really toxic relationship. So as I was working on myself, actually, like, the blinders were coming off, and I was actually able to see everything he was doing to me and controlling me, manipulating me, and but I was still tied to him through a business deal that we had. And so eventually we got into a physical altercation, and in the state of California, if you call the police for any domestic violence, well, there's at least one person going to jail. Somehow he managed to turn that on me, make me look like the crazy one, and we were separated, and I ended up going to jail under mandatory arrest in the state of California because I was the one that called the cops, but he has his way with words, pretty much. And I don't know what he said to the cops, but it was convincing enough for me to go to jail that night. That was definitely my rock bottom of my entire life, sitting in jail for 8 hours. That's another story. But anyway, that was my rock bottom, January 2020. Just turned 30 years old. And the whole 2020, I just spent every single minute, obviously in COVID too, working on myself. And so by August 2020, I literally cannot stay in that relationship 1 second longer. I had no money, I had no job, I had no car. He had stripped everything away from me. But I was very strong emotionally. That was like the biggest value I had to my life was my emotional maturity. So I got on a plane with 2 suitcases and I left, and I went to Florida. I moved in with my grandmother, continued to do the work, and I was still tied to him, and he was still financially abusing me, holding things over my head, saying he was gonna give me all this money that he owed me, and he strung me along for months and months and months and months. Finally, I just was like, I've had enough. You are the most emotionally draining person that I know. And I eventually cut off all communication in March 2021. Since then, my best friend and I actually started a podcast. It's called It Doesn't End Here. And it is helping women understand the psychology of narcissistic, sociopathic, gaslighting, abusive, toxic relationships, how women get into them. A whole season on my story about the trauma I was going through, not dealing with my past, my upbringing, and then obviously getting trauma bonded into an emotionally abusive relationship. So we have launched that in June. I continue to do the work every single day. The tools of TBM definitely helped me. I guess if I'm gonna say what I've manifested, I definitely manifested getting out of that relationship, and so much other stuff has happened. Our podcast is doing so well. In the first less than 3 months, we were already streaming in 40 countries, over 5,000 downloads. We have such good traction. We've already have multiple women that want to share their stories, and so we really want to talk about the psychology of why it happens. So we talk a lot about all those things I said, like trauma bonding, love bombing, disassociation, just all the psychology behind why women get into toxic abusive relationships. And also Dr. Tara, I've actually connected with Dr. Tara. Actually, I first reached out to her when I was in a relationship, and then she kind of knew both of us at the time. We've even had a FaceTime call with her one time, and then since then I've told her that I was out of it and kind of the truth behind everything. And so she's amazing. I love listening to her episodes on the podcast. Those are like the best. I think I've listened to number 110, like I'm pretty sure it's 110, like so many times. But yeah, so I want to share my story to be on the podcast, for kind of both the motivation and to be on the podcast, just between, you know, my upbringing of my parents and kind of how strict they were, all the shame that I developed, how emotionally immature I was, and then kind of finding my voice and my purpose through my therapy and TBM, and then manifested so many things since then. I've actually moved away from Florida. I'm in Denver, Colorado now. I got a new car, a new place, lots of opportunities coming my way. And yeah, so that is my testimony between dealing with mental illness with my parents, my mother's suicide, loss of a job, a divorce, rock bottom, just rock bottom after rock bottom, and finally seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, and just like I've found my purpose through all that. It's definitely through the podcast that my best friend and I started. We already have a season 2 coming out, and our goal is to help women understand and prevent, understand, and also heal from these relationships that they can find themselves in. So thank you for listening to my story. I hope to talk to you guys soon. My name is Kayla Fazio, and yeah, hope to talk to you guys soon. Bye.